This is the Better Software Faster podcast, where we deep dive into the intersection of tech and business to demystify, unravel, and explore concepts that you can apply to your own organization. From pipelines to processes, forecasting to fine-tuning, best practices to balance sheets, we draw on all of our customer-facing experience to bring you the best high-level talking points. Hello, welcome to the Better Software Faster podcast. I'm Adam Godwin with ReleaseWorks. Today we're going to be talking about enterprise mature companies spinning their service into internal products, which then get productized into customer-facing products. At what point do you become a software company without being a software company? Something we've seen, certainly with our customers and other people we've worked with, joined by Miro, our CEO, Amos, our COO, and gentlemen, if you'd like to start us off, could you lay out the landscape of when a mature enterprise company should consider productionizing their service into a software?
Morning.
Absolutely. Morning, or afternoon. Good evening. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think, where you say a company ends up being a software company without being a software company, I think the direction of travel for many organizations is to become a software company, right? And exactly what you just described is one mechanism for them ending up in the technology space, right? So even looking at our customers, we tend to see a trend where especially services oriented organizations who sell knowledge, sell expertise, end up getting to a point where they actually package up some of their expertise and provide that as a separate or side by side offering with their service offering to the market as a technology product, as a software product, right? And I think from my point of view, I've recognized a number of stages in that journey, right? You tend to at the start of doing what you do, selling consulting, just like we've done for quite a while, based on the collective expertise of our great people, right? But at some point you realize that actually this is something that we could be doing a bit more efficiently by building internal technologies, building internal solutions to deliver what we deliver, but do it faster with a more consistent, high quality, and do it more efficiently, right? So we end up building something that will typically glue some existing off-the-shelf software together, link up our timesheeting solution with our invoicing solution, for example, to remove some of the manual steps that are usually involved in in that side of things, or bring in small bits and pieces that our people use to deliver our offering by automating things like building an AWS landing zone, right? And typically we get into a higher level of maturity by having some of those internal tools on our belt to be able to do what we do as an organization better, right? But typically from there, we start to figure out, okay, instead of us, integrating existing systems or creating AWS landing zones automatically, is there actually a case for building a whole standalone piece of software for us to do what we do much better, right? Not just integrating existing pieces, but actually building some of our own IP by doing a complete piece of software, for example. And from there, the trend that we're seeing is then, is this actually something that we can go to market with as a standalone piece, right? Is this piece of software that we build actually something that we can take to our customers or brand new customers as its own standalone offering, right?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I just want to pick up what you said earlier about internal technologies, and these internal technologies are functions, operational functions that might be created. Somebody comes up with a good idea to make something easier, make something more process oriented, something more repeatable, and you do it because it's natural evolution of a service that you will continuously provide. So the the justification for doing it or the opportunity cost for doing it is a no-brainer because it's part of what you do. It's part of the substructure for the service that you provide externally. And so when we talk about this and when we see it in organizations that have evolved through their process culture, have evolved through their service culture, know what they're doing, know their market, know their customer, and know how to provide efficiency and how to close those efficiency gaps. But what we're seeing here is that these businesses, if they start to think more laterally about software and the strategy around the software that they're creating, they can actually create in the road. And if they do that, then there's the ability for them to abstract this particular piece of software, whenever it might be, make it more generic. So it's not something that's specifically for one customer, which is a trap that a lot of people fall into, but design something that's generic, that's therefore repeat. And if there's something, and we've come across this a lot, if you actually really dive down into it, there's some really great innovations and some great ideas in there. And you can start to pick these things up, look at them independently and say, this is something that we could productionize. And if you can monetize it. And if you can do that, well, then it turns something that was a cost center for you into a profit center. And that's not something that organizations very easily consider or even think laterally enough to make part of a software strategy, because typically their software strategy is, how do we automate or how do we manage the process flow around the costs and keep our costs down, as compared to turning something into a piece of software that could actually add more value to our organization, de-risk our existing revenue streams, and change the way that we operate. And although some of them need to change perhaps their operating model to accommodate it, that's not the most complex thing here as far as what we're trying to describe. But it is an evolution for these medium-sized, relatively mature organizations that can start to go in a subtly different direction. And we've seen some great examples of this happen in the past. We use them every day, right?
Absolutely, and there's a great actually point in what you said. Maybe it's a shift from tactical to strategic, right? If you've been using software to fill gaps tactically, do something that you do better, just fill in the gap between your timesheeting software and invoicing software or something like that, and actually shift that into much more of a strategic approach where as you say, this is no longer a cost center, this is going to be a profit center, and this might even be our biggest profit center, right?
Completely agree. And today we've got a dozen different ways of looking at those things. And I think what we find when we speak to organizations about the way that they design and the way that they build software, they are very reactionary. They're very transactional. So they're, understandably slightly myopic about, we've got this problem. If we could only do this, we would make the whole thing more efficient. Well, that's okay. There's a lot of innovation in there. And when you look at those innovations and when you look at how you could particularly or potentially turn those into something that becomes a valuable product in and of its own right, it's a really relatively straightforward thing to have that discussion, even if you end up discounting it because there's tons of competition out there or it doesn't make sense and we couldn't make it, price efficient, but it's still a really valuable thing to do. And lots of organizations never even go down that route because they're too focused on how can we lower our costs rather than how can we actually flip it and turn it into something that's a really, really valuable exercise. And we think of this process, something that we call abstraction. So when you look at now the way that software and particularly optimization in software or automation and optimization software, these things can become really, really valuable. It is possible to abstract them at that layer. So the service skill and the service capability and the intellectual capability that sits beyond that, which is really your core MO, is completely separate from the tools that you've built to support it. But those tools can be genericized and productized and monetized completely independently. And they're all your intellectual property, all value to you, something that you could bring into the market that would be anti-competitive, that de-risk your existing revenue models and be a very straightforward, structured thing for you to consider. So it's definitely worth considering.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the one of the examples that you were alluding to was the Amazon and AWS dynamic, right? You get really good at building an engine and running an engine, right? You get really good at having a machine that does a certain thing, right? Well, how do you take that up a notch, right? How do you take that to the next level of abstraction? Well, you build a machine that builds machines, right? You build in Amazon's case, they built AWS, a way for others to do what they did on the internet infrastructure and e-commerce space to begin with, right? So I think that's a great example of kind of taking their technology and leading with the technology rather than that being a cost center somewhere, right?
Yeah, and you've taken a warehousing architectural network infrastructure and turned it into $100 billion a year business with a $30 billion a year operating income. It's a pretty damn good exhibition of how to think laterally about productizing functions that you have to do anyway. I think the thing for me that's interesting though is that a lot of companies might shy away from it because they're not sure how to go about it, and there are things. But looking at this from a strategic objective point of view, you could consider and map out what would be involved in all of this before writing a line of code or deciding how it may or may not come to market and all the other good things that would go along with it in terms of product market fit or pricing or all the other bits and pieces that go along with it. But personally, I think the biggest pitfall is maybe considering that what you can do or what you're currently doing is something you can just release as a product without actually taking it to a professional software development lifecycle. I think that's the key, because if you're going to do this and you're going to productize it and you're going to bring it to market, it needs its own life, it needs its own support, it needs a really clear internal cycle of management that is independent from, let's say, I'll ring you today because I want a piece of software added to this thing that we do. And it's a very ad hoc, adjunct kind of development cycle and roadmap. It now starts to become a life cycle of its own, which means proper road mapping, proper agile management, proper backlogging, proper decision making. And that's the key. If you're going to do this, don't have to do it properly, break it out, manage it separately, and give it a life of its own. Then it'll have a heartbeat and you'll love what you see. And it will still, of course, do what you need it to do inside your existing customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other point why organizations sometimes shy away from this is that they're not Amazon, right?
Yeah.
But we've got great examples even in our customers from organizations who've operate at a much smaller scale than the giants, right? But still are able to and have been able to build a successful technology product to go alongside their service oriented offering, right? And they've seen benefits where, for example, the technology product, the software product, actually provides a level of continuity into their service based offering, which typically is a project A from Z type of thing, whereas technology products and software products tend to be much more commercial rolling contracts and ongoing engagements than something that has a clear start and an end, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. I would even go as far as to say that if you're in this kind of service oriented industry right now and you are relying on software deployments to support that, all of which have got great innovation in it kind of makes sense to time out and go, the next piece that you create or what you're looking at to create in future, is there a market for this in and of itself? Because it will change your thought process around how you develop it and why you develop it, and even what mentality you use. For instance, you might outsource at the moment a lot of this stuff to a third party to develop this stuff for you. Whereas actually this could start to become a core competency, which means you might be better off with an internal software development team that works to your rules and your timescales with your agility, and that creates IP that's fully ring fenced internally for you, which you then sell as part of your cost center going forward. So I put it to you that it makes more sense to consider every piece of software that you're writing through that lens to see if there is an ultimate outlet for it, which could, basically give you a return on your investment and more, right?
Yeah.
So you're sweating those assets. You're not just creating this glue or these APIs or this integration to make your life easier, but you're sweating this IP and creating this IP with a potential possibility to turn it into a really strong value proposition, not just for you, but for your stakeholders.
Yeah, well, I wanted to just to wind it back and sort of take a half step back, because I think when we approach these sorts of things, we speak to companies and they say, well, we're not a software company, we're a hospitalities company, or we're a retail company, or a finance company, right? And we just so happen to have software, we just so happen to use software. And there's a fairly notable pivot here where you're talking about, because every company uses software, off the shelf software. You wouldn't be able to run your business nowadays without it. At what point then is that tipping point? Who's going to be the person orchestrating it? Because we're coming from the outside we always get the bigger picture because we're an external force. But when you're very, very close to it on the inside, who is the person that should be kind of taking this holistic view across the entire tech suite and say, actually, we've got some connective tissue between these systems. Maybe we could build something more purposeful.
I can give you a stab at, because the typical lawyer's answer is depends. But what I would say is, person with the most scope over this is your CTO. So a CTO should be very, very well aware not only of what these applications are, but the budget that's involved and the resource that's involved in getting them to the point where they are right now, the roadmap for them, the feature functionality they currently have. So there should be some lateral thought there about what this looks like, what it's turning into, right? What its potential opportunity is. So my experience is that most of these people are looking at a perspective of managing costs, providing value to the business, right? Well, there should be some lateral thought there now that says it's not about that, right? Yes, that was its genesis. But is there an alternative medium for this? Have we a level of abstraction, or can we build a level of abstraction that creates independent value? So my first point of call would be an objective I would give my CTO, to constantly think about these forms of software integration, to see if any of them have a heartbeat on their own, a separate life of their own. Secondary, then, I think, would be a COO. A COO should have the ability to look at this through both a technical, an operating, and a commercial lens. And a good COO should be able to look at maybe where a CTO is working purely from a technical angle, and pick this up and ask the curious question. Is this something that we could start to look at, spinning out? Is this something we could look to start to create into a separate vehicle? Is there an investment method that can spin this out, make it anti-competitive or whatever it might be? They're for me are the two people that, in a typical senior management team, you would expect to have that level of interaction. And then your final is the COO, because what you're then doing is your CTO stroke COO or come up with these concepts, and then your CEO has really got that power of veto to say, yeah, I think this is a great idea. Let's bring it to the board. Let's go get some investment for it. Or no, let's stick to our knitting. Never come near me with this again, and we're going to carry on doing what we're doing, right? There may be valid reasons where they're all true, right? But I think it's a C-suite function, and I think it starts with the CTO. What do you think, Ryan?
To me, that makes a lot of sense. But in my experience, the reality, tends to be much more reactive, right? You get into a board meeting, and the theme of the day is, our number one competitor, their sales are going that way, our sales are going that way, right? What's wrong? What are they doing differently than we are, right? Well,
that's up and down for the podcast audience.
Exactly. Thank you. So we start looking at, for example, okay, well, our competitor has a hugely successful omni-channel strategy, right? They provide the exact very high quality customer experience on all their channels, right? They've got a great mobile app, they've got a great website, they've got a great point of sale system. Everything works fluently together, right? It's all built to fulfill a single purpose, right? And more often than not, these organizations, you can't get that stuff off the shelf, right? You can't get 5 different systems that work as one off the shelf, right? So these organizations build what they need, right? They've gone through the trouble and through the investment to actually build something internally that they can use to provide this seamless experience for their customers, right? So the real competitive advantages of doing this, with your own IP and with your own very high quality, software delivery teams, they really stand out, right? And more often than not, the conversations I've seen go from, oh shit, something's wrong, we're not growing, our competitors are growing, what's going on, right? And the underlying reasons are things like, well, they're doing technology at a much higher level than we are, right?
Yeah. I'd love to think that it was always somebody who's thinking what if and coming up with a strategic approach to it. But it is always a combination of both. Yeah, and you will quite often have the smart one, maybe even managing the development team, saying, "This is something that we can do externally. Why don't we bring this to market?" I've certainly had that conversation many times before, but it's quite often being kicked into the long grass because the right person at the right level isn't prepared to, take it up the chain and create a value proposition for it. But also, they're not thinking about that level of abstraction. They're thinking about it in a very monofunctional thing as compared to it adding value, not just in our market, but in other markets. And the other aspect is quite often not genericized enough. So in other words, you'd almost have to write it to make it generic enough for it to be used by other organizations. So these are design principles, right? And that if you're looking at what you're building in the future, these design principles can actually give you the best of both worlds. And it's just managing variability inside a product. But that's not hard.
Yeah.
So for us, I think it's something that if you have the right strategy and the right SDLC, something that always gives you that option to spin it out or not, depending upon where you see the state of the market at any point in time. So I'd agree with Miro that there is definitely a somewhat reactionary view to a lot of this stuff. But when you look at what people like us would do inside an organization, is we would go in and lift up the drains and go, what have you got? Look at the value you've got here. Why aren't you considering taking this to market? And they may never consume, right? So there's the reactionary transactional mentality, but there's also the strategic lateral thought around abstraction that most people, quite frankly, in my view, aren't considering.
Yeah.
Do you think this is the sort of thing that would work better as more of like an executive mandate? Person at the very top of the pyramid who sees the whole picture and they have their vision for the company. Maybe obviously they don't want to become a software company, but they can see the big picture and they can see, as Miro said, their sales going down. What are our competitors doing differently? You feel like maybe if there was a CEO who's listening to this right now, it's something that they should consider, take a half step back, look at the whole pipeline. Are we building, as you said, are we building IP? Are we building usable products that just need to be taken and evolved one extra step further?
I mean, let me paint you a scenario. If you're a service oriented company that has a fundamental reliance on technology, which is most of, right, through some form or some form factor, then you have an increasing and a significant budget in tech design and software creation. I don't think there's an executive management team that I've come across, particularly with a cost conscious CFO sitting on it, that isn't going to be interested in somebody's idea or concept of turning those costs into profits. Right? The question is it aligned with our operational aspirations? Is it something that we could achieve and execute? Does it make sense? And is there a market for it? So push it through the same channels to figure out whether it's viable or not. But these are just blind spots that organizations have while they're blindly continuing to spend money on resourcing either internally or externally for software development to fill gaps. Get it, understand it, but think differently about it because those abstracted layers have got real gold seen through them.
Absolutely. And just getting back to what you said before, don't want to be all doom and gloom, but it really does require a strategic approach into taking something that you've built and taking that into the market on its own, right? Issues that or pitfalls that we tend to come across are, lack of, security by design approach in the product itself, right? We only built this for ourselves, so we don't need to worry about brute force password attacks or whatever, right? But that all that changes once you take it out to the market and let some real external people play with it, right?
Right.
So, yeah, exactly. Break it in more ways than you can imagine, right? So there's a very very real requirement for an approach where you take the product and productionize it, right?
Yeah, but if we focus on those pitfalls a little bit, because then you said you don't want to be doom and gloom, but you know that if it was a board meeting, right, somebody would immediately just jump up with the objection of why something can't be done because you've come to them with a radical idea. I can definitely understand that there would probably be a little bit of hesitancy with regards to things like, well, if we're providing it to external, we suddenly have liabilities that we didn't have before. We've got to own the infrastructure. We've got to have a support team in place. We have SLA as an uptime and everything else. So what would be, let's say we've got a hypothetical company and they have actually productionized their service into an internal software. They've replaced their internal tech stack with the thing that they've made. To be able to take it that next step forward and actually productize it, what would be sort of some tangible first steps from a non-software company to be able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, Miro, go ahead. I mean, I'll fill in the gaps. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think from my point of view, it really comes down to the overall shift into this is a strategic asset for us, right? And this is a strategic asset that requires an approach that will take us there, right? So more often than not, you mentioned it before, Amos, but more often than not, we really want to build technology as a core competency in the organization, right? And that's what we've done with many of our customers, right? Taking their non-technology oriented strategy into something that is very much embracing technology and built to improve and enhance and iterate on technology in the longer term rather than just putting out fires, right? So one of the things is to build the internal capability, right? You need to have the right processes in place. You need to have the right people in place to make sure that once you take your product into market, it's properly supported, it's properly evolving as the market shifts and changes, right? So of course, we tend to come in as release works. We tend to come in at the point where an organization wants to take their product into market, and we help them productionize it, right? But obviously the benefits there are that we are able to get the organization going very very quickly. They don't need to go and hire their team. They don't need to go and get the processes in place without knowing what they're doing, quite frankly, right? We're able to come in and build the scaffolding, if you will, very quickly to start making tangible progress. But I think as always, the light at the end of the tunnel definitely tends to be the place where the organization has its own internal capability to build and evolve the product that they're selling, right?
I agree. And I think you can model all of this, right? Because there's an opportunity cost to doing this. And in the end, it all comes down to money. So when you look at how this product would be genericized, how you would bring it to marketplace, what would need to be true for that to happen, and then what you can sell it for, and what the potential market is for this, and what the demographics of that market look like, considering you know your own market very well. And this is with or without selling it abstracted to competitors, then you can model the opportunity cost one against the other. And clearly, if there's a value proposition, that means that over X period of time, it is going to turn into a profit center. It's not only going to pay for its own development, but it's going to add and contribute to the organization. I think you'll find pretty quickly that those objections go away. Because the argument for de-risking revenue is always a strong one, particularly if it's something you're building anyway, right? So, making it more generic, making it more secure, making it more usable, they're all value propositions. Why wouldn't you do that? So I think that it's right to have that balanced scorecard approach to, is this worth doing, by running a fundamental series of models against it. but the commercial aspect to its outcome will trump all of that if it turns out to be a no-brainer from a value proposition, and you can sell it for good money at the other end, and you can see the markets there. That's my experience of it.
Well, these are all really great insights. And any kind of final thoughts or words that you want to say to anybody who's maybe thinking along these lines already or considering it?
I think from my point of view, it is definitely a trend that we're seeing, right? And we've seen examples of going down this path go wrong, but we've seen more examples of going down this path go very right. Right. So I think getting started in the right path and getting some support in figuring out whether this is actually worthwhile doing for the organization, is a good idea. And obviously, this is what we do day in and day out. So very glad to have the conversations.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would say that, abstracting and considering to productize your service is a sign of strategic maturity. And you should be considering this at a C-suite or a senior managerial level, even if it's something that you discard, something that you should be considering on a regular basis. And particularly if you're looking to build new software, fill a gap, or to manage something from an architectural point of view as part of your service offering, think about the generic approach and the ability of turning cost into profit, because it's a very valuable exercise for you for IP which you already.
Fantastic. We'll make that the last word. Gentlemen, thank you both very much for your time. I think this was a great conversation. Lots of really insightful points and useful and valuable information. To anybody who's listening who'd like to register for the podcast, you can reach us at release.works/podcast. You can always get in touch with us there as well if there's anything you'd like to chat about further. Thank you both very much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.